cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, niggas don't know what to think. Thought I get money, you change. What you thought we was the same? Still stay away from them clones. Niggas that leave me alone. Talking about niggas is low. Run with niggas who don't know you. Whoa, I made that zagging when city to city. You niggas not hot in your state. If it was money to get a hit Henny, we get it and never complain. Same go for the gang, and we split it up all the same. I can't really eat, let's stay straight, cause we go way back in the day. My day ones from back in the day, they still hang around me today. You wanna come round us, you can't. I'm rolling up loud, it's great. But mama, she bad but complain, cause I'm too in love with my dreams. And I gotta get on the plane, and go get this money with them. I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang.
I get the bag with the gang, taking that Zach to the bank. Henny be all in my drink. You niggas is stupid, you think that should change? You not even hot in your gang. Ain't nothing even hot about your gang. You niggas be lying about saying, be posting them pictures of guns for the fame. Niggas just look at me different now. Say that's your man, but he a clown. Don't fuck around with the fuck arounds. Little nigga, you should cut it out. Me and my niggas take different routes. Punch a bitch nigga all in his mouth. Hold up my nigga, we different now. I need a Robert, it's just my style. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I get a bitch today, she probably a foreign model. I get a check today, I spent it all tomorrow. I'm with my gang today, tomorrow never promise.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang.
Your attention, please. Please do not smoke in the terminal building. Smoking is only permitted in the specified smoking areas.
Zach.
Thank you.
OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang. Gang, gang. OG, I draw up the plate, and then he go get the cake, then we link up with the gang.
I think I'm cute. I know I'm sexy. I've got the look that drives the girls wild. I got the moves that really move them. I send chills up and down their spines. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. Let's go. I make them hot. I make them shiver. Things get weak whenever I'm around. They see me walk. They hear me talk. I make them feel like their God ain't real. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. That mic flip though. Hands off the merchandise. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. I'm just a sexy boy. I'm not your boy toy. Welcome everybody to another edition of Late Night Counter Apologetics. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, folks, I am in airplane mode. All right, folks, let's go ahead and get into tonight's activities. Before we do, y'all already know the drill. Let's go ahead and get into our communion. Please raise your glasses and hold on to your asses. Through him, with him, in the unity of the flying man. All glory and honor is yours who flied for our sins forever and ever. You may drink.
Dublin, and he's going to play us out.
That's not the right song. All right, and now for our communion song. This one comes to us from Foy Vance. It's called Where Everybody Knows Your Name.
Want to play what to finish us up?
Do you know what? I don't know the name of this song, actually, but I know the song, and so will you.
Oh, I look forward to this. Foy Vance, take it away.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. And they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see troubles are all the same.
All right, I got Carrie Ann first.
You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Well, all those nights when you got no lights and the check is in the mail, and your little angel on the coward by its tail.
Look at the trees
Your
a
third
second.
fiance didn't show. Well, sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and you're always glad they came. You wanna be where you can see see. Troubles are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Well, you get out of bed and the coffee's dead.
And Lena was third.
Morning
Awesome.
isn't looking bright. You shrink right off to Europe and he doesn't even write. Your girlfriend says she's not a girl. Be glad there's one place in the world where everybody knows your name. And they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see. Troubles are all the same.
Sorry, Carrie Ann.
You wanna go where everybody knows your name. You wanna be where you can see. Troubles are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
All right, I got Trees, Carrie Ann, Lena.
Foy Vance.
like you
Most
right
common
now.
word coming in by
Glad to have
text,
you guys
Foy,
in the
is
chat.
goosebumps.
Appreciate you.
Believe it or not, we've had that repeatedly across the whole series. If you want to see Foy Vance's cheeky grin when he sang the line,
All right.
when you find your girlfriend is a guy, you can go on the website. We'll upload a video of Foy singing.
All right. So today is I'm kind of really excited. So recently I started paying attention to FD Signifier. I don't have the channel linked in the description, but it's FD Signifier on YouTube. Oh, and I do have the @ Y'all know it's like a social, so I have the @ in the title, so you can find them using that. So the reason this video spoke out so strongly to me, gang, is because this is something I have not really known how to approach. There's only so many people I even feel like I can talk to about this. And I was like, man, maybe I need to watch this video and just think about it for a while. And then I tried to start jumping into it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we needed to talk about it on stream. A lot of people may not be aware of like my particular frustration with my family. And for me, I only speak about it because it's so motivating to why I would even have a channel like this. But it's basically my family sees themselves as, for lack of a better way to put it, like progressive black people. And I think of them as really conservative black people. And it's been so difficult to talk about because when we talk about black conservatives, you know, everybody jumps straight to the coons, like the Candace Owens and the Officer Tatums, the Jesse Lee Petersons. But for a lot of us, there's really this way in which mainstream black Christians often represent conservative ideological viewpoints and stances on issues. But then there's like this presumption that they can't be conservative because they're black. And you really shouldn't call them conservative because, you know, you're like lumping them in with the right-wingers and, you know, that just seems so capricious or whatever. Man, this is how I really feel, man. It's like black people don't see it. And it's so frustrating. And then what happens is a lot of our cultural, like the people that they point to as like, oh, these are the, the good black people, especially the celebrities, like the larger, figures with larger platforms will say, they're so often in one way or another actually really representative again of conservative ideology. So yeah, I was just through the moon that I saw FD Signifier made a video about this, because I've just recently started following his channel, thanks to Maya, and shit's super good. But I feel a bit like him, like he'll talk about a bit in this video, like this is still very real to me. So I haven't seen all this, I've only seen like the first few minutes. And this is something I still don't know how to talk about. But it's basically this idea that just like a lot of us who consider ourselves like progressive are frustrated, where we're really asked to choose between the far right and the center right, I think that same dynamic is playing out within the community. And he's going to talk about, I guess, how certain figures play into that. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it. It's called The Real Faces of Black Conservatism. And we're probably going to have to do this one in a few parts. So this is part one.
I just told you a little while ago, these leaders that they call leaders, this included Lena Horne, this included Dick Gregory, and this included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. Show me in the white community where a comedian is a white leader. Show me in the white community where a singer is a white leader, or a dancer or a trumpet player is a white leader. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns that have been set up over the white community and over the black community by the white community, and have been made celebrities, and usually say exactly what they know that the white man wants to hear. Usually Negroes know that when this bourgeois Negro walks through the door, he is not doing something that he's initiated himself, but he's involved in something in which the white man is the absolute author of, and has sent him to the Negro community for some information. And when they give that Negro some information, usually they give him the information that they want him to take back to the white man, because that's who he's going to take it back to.
Come on, entrepreneurs. Let's do business that looks capitalistic.
It's the first part called The Distractions.
Education, ladies and gentlemen. Respect for the elderly, respect for yourself, respect for others. These young girls got no business having sex.
I support any protest that's effective, and if you can provide effective ways to push a conversation forward and help people at the same time, I'm really into action. Actionable item, what are we gonna do with it? Like everyone heard, and we hear what you're saying, and everybody know I agree with what you're saying.
All right, so a little while ago, I released a video titled something along the lines of The Truth About Black Conservatives. In that video, I did a lot of things. I talked about the false narrative that black people are socially conservative and that somehow black people really would be voting for the Republican Party if it wasn't for the fact the Republican Party is so racist. While there is some truth to the idea that black people are socially conservative, the reality is that black people have always been much more closely aligned to leftist thought and ideology. And you see this through black political history. Except the problem is that this black political history, the history of the black left, of black socialists, has been hidden in plain sight for the last 60 or so years. To illustrate this, I used examples of figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, Bayard Rustin, A. Philip Randolph, James Baldwin, Ella Baker, all themselves being socialists at different times during their political careers, with the cherry on top being Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man often cited by conservatives and Republicans as a moderate and a model for modern civil rights action, which ignores the reality of King during his time when he was the most hated man in America and he was seen as an overt radical, especially during his later years when King became more and more open to radical action, anti-colonialism, anti-war, and anti-capitalism, an evolution that most likely got him killed. The other major point from that video was to also make sure people understand that when I talk about the left or leftists, I'm not talking about Democrats either. In fact, Democrats are very much themselves conservatives, especially here in the United States. There's the comment.
And boom, that right there, that's when I knew me and him, we were at least singing the same tune in warm-ups. You understand what I'm saying to you? Because that's it right there. It hits it on the head, and it feels so validating to see, you know, to hear from another black man, even if it is remotely and he's a content creator who's never heard of me. Even if it's somebody who has no idea I exist. Nah, but for real, it's very frustrating because all right, so growing up, right, you know, I kind of grew up with a little bit of a suburban bent to it in the Poconos, and that meant I was geographically isolated from a lot of my family members. And so there was a lot of this problematic, to say the very least, treatment of me coming up like I somehow wasn't gonna be black enough, which I always felt was like kind of ironic because I lived in a environment where my blackness stood out every single moment of every single day and actually was something I had to deal with on a daily basis. Whereas from my perspective, people who grew up in other environments, at least being black was normal. So it was kind of ironic to be treated like, oh, you're privileged, you're not really black. And I never really would say anything to me, but I'd be like, man, please, like, being black is fucking easy for you. Like, you go to a fucking all-black school, get on my face with that shit. But, you know, that's just young people, you know, just having, you know, living in different worlds or whatever. But where I'm going with that is, like, there was always this real concern that, like, I wouldn't understand black history or I wouldn't understand what it really means to be black in America, or I would get too comfortable, too complacent with my proximity to whiteness, all of this type of stuff that, of course, I couldn't put words to then, but it's so easy to see now. And then there's this great irony of the people who, you know, apparently felt this need to be hyper vigilant when they raised me, like somehow I wouldn't be black enough. The irony is now I feel like as a, you know, I don't know what the right, I'm trying to find an aged thing. For a black man at my stage in life, right, where I'm not a boy and I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like, you know, I'm in my mid-30s, so I'm not a baby. But at the same time, as far as professional in my own personal adult journey, I still feel like I have most of my adult life, or the bulk of my adult life, hopefully in front of me. I'm now looking at the older people around me like, wait, now it's like weird. It's like y'all are the conservatives. When did y'all stop trying to be all about, you know, the historic arc of black progress? When did y'all stop being all about making sure we're not falling for the white man's okie doke? When did y'all get so comfortable with your proximity to white man and white supremacy that now y'all ain't even trying to be woke no more, like straight up? And it's kind of devastating, to be honest with you. and you really never really learn how to take it. You never really learn how to take it. It just feels so crazy, like literally, like you're living in some sort of bizarro world. So I'm kind of serious when I say like it's super validating to hear somebody else who's really dug into this like break it down and just be able to speak to it so clearly.
Common phrase that the left wing and the right wing are all part of the same bird.
Yeah, the Democrats
that
are
is
fucking
something I very
conservative,
much
yo.
believe in. The easiest example that I used in an old video was around police reform and how even after now years of research on the nature of crime and how to stop crime and deal with crime in America, both Democrats and Republicans still keep putting their money into policing, the very thing that many black people have been telling the entire world does not help them.
It might be
This
worse
may
than
sound
that, Joe.
extreme to some of you, but this is a belief that has been popular in African
But yeah,
American
it's like finding out your fucking grandma's Doug.
political thought for a long time. Specifically, we'll talk about Malcolm X, another legend from that 1960s era whose leftist leanings were also hidden later in life.
Once the police have convinced the white public that the so-called Negro community is a criminal element, they can go in and question, brutalize, murder unarmed, innocent Negroes, and the white public is gullible enough to back them up. This makes the Negro community a police state. This makes the Negro neighborhood a police state. It's the most heavily patrolled. It has more police in it than any other neighborhood, yet it has more crime in it than any other neighborhood. How can you have more cops and more crime? Why? It shows you that the cops must be in cahoots with the criminals.
Not long before he died, after leaving the NOI, he would match these types of sentiments with a better worldview after going to Mecca. He understood that black people weren't special or unique in their suffering. Most importantly for this video, Malcolm began to recognize that there were various factions within black political thought that were really working against black people's best interests, whether it was because they were clearly adherent to a capitalist model or they were just really wasting our time. And that's really where I left the last video, recognizing that although Candace Owens and Thomas Sowell and Clarence Thomas and these other black conservatives were a problem, the reality for black people actually in community and trying to address issues for other black people, many of those figures just don't mean anything to black people. Most of us don't even know who some of them are. On the flip side, there are black conservatives that black people understand and recognize that definitely need to be critiqued and talked about more.
Yes, and that's the issue, right? And that's what I'm hoping to walk through this with him and with y'all as well, so that it becomes easier to recognize black conservative voices that might not initially strike you as such, because again, they're not doing the dancing for Master's butter biscuits, at least not as explicitly as somebody like a Candace Owens. And a lot of times these people are just considered role models in the black community, which is unfortunate because we tend to have limited options. and then it's a real problem when people sort of don't see these conservatives under cloak.
If you're ever going to really understand what conservatism is for black people, and that's what this video is about. This video is going to try to unpack how black political thought in America went from overtly socialist, became capitalist, hyper-materialist, and traditionalist movements today. Why have black radical traditions somehow found themselves housed under the Democratic Party when even Martin Luther King was very clearly against the idea of white moderates and white liberals? How did an organization like Black Lives Matter start with all the energy and aesthetics of leftist radical political movements and end with the founders buying mansions and getting into electoral politics? How did black conservatism come to take over black political thought after the civil rights movement? These are complex questions that require long, complex answers, and there's no way I can truly explain all of them in one video. Even one that's as long as this one will probably be. But what I will do, along with my guests in this vid, is try to break it down using three important figures who represent three important facets of how this change is taking place. I'm going to hopefully try to start a conversation, explain how black conservatism actually exists in this country and how if we don't do something about real black conservatism, it's probably going to get all of us killed.
What the problem lies is very simple, is that American capitalism has always maintained a system in which the supermajority of black people have disproportionately been relegated to the most disaffected economic forms of labor, that we're supposed to be surprised that abhorrent social behavior develops in these communities when there's no economic alternatives that occur. So the whole purpose of conservatives is to basically disabuse the notion that black people are deserving of any kind of policy that will transform their economic condition because they are so culturally defective that capitalism can't save them. And they do this because they're paymasters like the Heritage Foundation, the Manhattan Institute, and these other think tanks pay them to say this crap, and they are in line with it because it lines their pocket.
0% of police shooting happen in neighborhoods where the average income is over $200,000 a year. 100% are under $200,000 a year. When you break down that further, you see that one of the biggest predictors of actually being shot by the cops is being poor or low income, being in a poor community. Okay. So not to say that obviously black people aren't disproportionately targeted by the police and disproportionately victims of excessive force, but it's also true that black people are disproportionately poor and low income. You can't disentangle these things, and people who want you to try are ops because they know that nothing good comes from it, because ultimately for black people who are a small minority of this country as well, to be able to have the political capital to make the kind of change to the police force, to our economic system that is structured in a way to have a permanent underclass of about 10% of people, and look who just happens to be 10% of the country, you are going to have to figure out a way to build a political coalition that can get 50 plus 1% of the vote.
Always ask, why do I like what I like and how do I know what I know? I encourage people to constantly open themselves up to what is left of them politically, to engage from whatever background they see themselves as identifying with, the radical traditions that are in those communities, which are always suppressed. I don't care what your background, I don't care what pronoun, identity, I don't care what you see yourself as. There is a very brilliantly beautiful militant radical tradition in that community that is currently being suppressed and intentionally kept from you. So go find it. Get off the screen, get off the mic, go find it, connect with people in real grassroots organizations, and that's where all the answers are going to come. What you do, what I do publicly is meant to raise questions, push people in certain directions, but no answer actually comes in these spaces. You have to be offline and in committed, organized political spaces, and then all the real beauty happens.
All right, now, I don't know that I agree with that. I mean, I definitely appreciate the sentiment of pushing for real change, but it strikes me as just a bit of that, this generation and their goddamn screens. You know, I've been reflecting on this a lot because I feel like I'm in a state of questioning my own online participation, and especially a lot of y'all know I've been dealing with sort of isolation due to the, you know, pandemic or whatever. And I find myself hearing this rhetoric of preferentially engaging. I was watching a Believe It or Not podcast while I was doing yard work earlier. And the podcast was about sloth. It was about sloth as one of the 7 deadly sins. And really just breaking down how much bullshit rhetoric is out there that's like makes us feel lazy and makes us feel like we need to be working. But a lot of it was like pastors and apologists kind of, you know, basically denigrating the fact that people are
on their screens. Like one person was even denigrating the idea of work-life balance because they're like, well, what do you care about work-life balance? Because you spend all the life part on a screen. And it just finally started to hit me like, oh, this hits me like people who want to go back and live in the past. And they like look down at us because to them, interacting on a screen and, you know, playing video games, like they don't count as like real activities, especially not for adults or something. And again, I get that. But at the same time, it's like we're products of our times and our environment. And we live in just this incredibly connected age. And I almost feel like, you know, social media, new media, it direct lines you into the main vein consciousness potentially of a much broader audience and able to have a much bigger impact. So I don't know. I think I got to find my own way to have conversations with people that think differently than I do about the value of interacting in online spaces. But I've kind of become less of a person who sees it as a stopgap, like, oh, you plug into social media sometimes, or hey, you there's nothing to do in real life, or you can't hang out with your real friends, so you hop on the internet. I don't know. I just think this is the age of interactivity.
To explain this as best as I can, I'm going to have to do the scary work of critiquing black political leaders and legends, specifically probably the most prominent black political figure of the last 50 or 60 years. A person whose legacy to many is unassailable and infallible, which is probably part of the problem. It's not easy, and it's not going to be much fun. But it is what it is. If you want to get to the bottom of this shit, you got to be courageous enough to say the thing you're not supposed to say. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and get started with the person who, for many reasons, almost everybody black is too afraid to critique publicly. But like I said in the last video, no guts, no glory.
All you scared to death Negroes. Just sit down.
All right, so we are outside in a secluded...
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get it started off with blasphemies on top of blasphemies on top of blasphemies, and I'm going to just kick it with y'all like this. When I came up, not a lot of attention was paid to Farrakhan. I think a lot of that is, one, I come from a very, very Christian family, so nah. And then also between, you know, and then whatever I was going to say in school or whatever, right, was going to be the very kind of Christianized, whitewashed version of American history and civil rights. And so, you know, there's definitely figures, you know, like Malcolm X and others that I know of that are, you know, associated with Islam. But I also think a bit of it is my time, right? I think I'm just a bit young to be hugely influenced by Farrakhan, but also it's just and I hope this is in there at some point, because it's how I see the overall problem. Is I cannot separate the contributions of a lot of these people from their particularly strong religious ideologies. And so I feel the same way, but I feel that way about all of them, right? It's the problem I see with the Christians. But yeah, for me, it's like when I think of Farrakhan and a lot of the people's, I tend to just think of prominent African-American leader, ... but definitely on that Nation of Islam tip, and I'm just not with that. But not for any more or less reasons than I'm against, Christian civil rights leaders.
Area where it is hopefully safe for me to break the rules about who I talk about on this channel. I am quite confident that some people are already about to hit the comment section or just click off the video outright. Peace to you all. For everyone else that wants to stick around and hear some useful critique of one of Black people's most legendary political figures, welcome, and give me a little grace while we get this started. Please don't click off the video. Just hear me out. I'm gonna be as nice as I possibly can. I am genuinely scared of talking bad about Louis Farrakhan. I have family who are NOI, which stands for Nation of Islam. I'm from Chicago, the headquarters of NOI. I've seen the fruit of Islam, the security force of the NOI, put in work before. And also Farrakhan is low-key immortal. The man is about to be 90 years old. He's beat colon cancer 3 times and he hasn't slowed down yet. Louis Farrakhan is a legend for a lot of reasons that should be appreciated. Farrakhan has fed and housed and inspired Black people in America and around the world, really, for nearly 60 years. He has shaped the Black political imagination and ostensibly carried on a lot of radical traditions. I'm not going to act like I didn't grow up near a lot of NOI people who were amazing people to grow up around. I've had men in the NOI who were always around to provide guidance and warmth when I was growing up. The NOI has done a lot for Black people, and I am not denying that as I get further into the critiques in this section. That said, 2 things can be true at once. Dehumanizing enemies and people that do harm to us is reactionary and ultimately harmful to everyone. Not only does this foster harmful ideologies amongst ourselves, but it hurts our analysis and critique of the problems we face. It is important not to think that my critique of Farrakhan and the NOI and similar Black political movements is a call to cancel all NOI-related connections, ideologies, and valued contributions that they've made to Black people. But I do hope to bring into focus how harmful Farrakhan has been in the grand scheme of things. Farrakhan, as I said, is the most significant force in Black political thought of my generation.
Black people who were brought to this country were stripped of their names, language, culture, religion, God, and taken totally away from the history of themselves. Here are 30 million people who don't wear their own names, they wear your names. Who don't speak their own language, they speak English, which is not their language.
That said, the gist of things is that Farrakhan, while all of these good things, has a ton of obvious and inexcusable baggage that has been subterfuged and ignored for far too long. He is the most significant voice in Black political thought and has saved countless lives, but he's also played in our faces and kind of wasted our time for the last 60 years while steering Black political thought away from anything useful or meaningful pretty much the whole time. So let's get into the easy stuff, the stuff that really should not be controversial. First and foremost, the NOI is low-key a cult. Like, surely y'all know this, right? If you've read the autobiography of Malcolm X, you understand that with the NOI...
I just needed it. Like, can we just off the top just say, y'all know this is a call, right? Now, I really appreciate it, brother, because, man, Black people and their religion, man. Oh, boy. Oh, so exhausting, y'all. I'm going to just put it to you like this. If you want to be anti-racist, join me in my movement, y'all. Hashtag Black people deserve the truth. That's it. That's all. That's it. Just think about it. Just think about it. That's why you're now realize being anti-theist and anti-racist walk hand in fucking hand. Why? Because hashtag Black people deserve the truth. How are we ever going to genuinely do whatever combination of continuing to lift ourselves towards better circumstances and cooperate, with, progressive advocates and all of this shit to do better for ourselves if we do not at least start with demanding the fucking truth.
I believes is not that far from Scientology.
About 6,600 years ago, when 70% of the people were satisfied and 30% were dissatisfied, among the dissatisfied was born a Mr. Yakub. He was born to create trouble, to break the peace, and to kill.
That's facts.
His head was unusually large. Though he was a black man, Mr. Yakub, embittered toward Allah now, decided as revenge to create upon the earth a devil race, a bleached out white race of people. From his studies, the big head scientist knew that black man contained two germs, black and brown. He knew that the brown germ stayed dormant, as being the lighter of two germs. It was Elijah Muhammad teaches that the greatest and mightiest God who appeared on earth was Master W.D. Bard. He came from the east to the west, appearing in North America at a time when the history and the prophecy that is written was coming to realization. I was to learn later that Elijah Muhammad's tales, like this one of Yakub, infuriated the Muslims of the East. While at Mecca, I reminded them that it was their fault, since they themselves hadn't done enough to make real Islam known in the West. Their silence left a vacuum into which any religious faker could step and mislead our people.
And this lends to a plethora of conspiracy theories that have always dogged the black political pretty much since the NOI came into prominence, and actually a little bit before. We'll get into that later. Whether this is the myth of the gay agenda and the feminization of black men, or aliens, and some of these brothers are flat earthers, and of course, we can't ignore the rampant anti-Semitism.
The satanic Jews, they control.
Y'all, did you? How you know that man is a preacher? Did y'all hear the fucking enunciation and the flair on that shit? That is some bona fide bigotry. When you bring your best swag to your fucking slurs. The satanic Jews. Whoa. Whoa.
Everything and mostly everybody.
Farrakhan has been peddling anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that he himself inherited probably from Marcus Garvey, who we'll talk about a little later, for pretty much the entire time he's been prominent. Now, understand, there are significant issues between black and Jewish people in America that have never really been fully processed or digested between either group, and there are many reasons to critique these issues among black and Jewish people. The problem is that the person often leading that critique has been Louis Farrakhan, but instead of leading it with analysis on economics and urban issues, it's mostly been just lazy conspiracy theories that go back to the protocols of Zion.
It is now becoming apparent that there were many Israelis and Zionist Jews in key roles in the 9/11 attack.
Farrakhan's anti-Semitism speaks so loudly that it makes it impossible for others with better takes and better frames of analysis on the issue to speak up. This constant anti-Semitic nonsense has influenced many fringe black political ideologies that have sadly in recent times escaped to the surface due to folks like Ye and Kyrie Irving bringing what have always been fringe ideologies to the forefront through their celebrity status. And I'm repeating fringe for a couple of reasons. One, because I know some of these dudes are going to watch the video and they're going to respond, explain how this is me showing my alignment to white liberals, completely ignoring the fact that black people, the whole of black American culture, has always satirized and comedically characterized these types of dudes, the weird way they come off, their ridiculous conspiracy theories, and pretty much everything about them.
Turn that poop into what? Turn that poop into what?
I'm skin angel. Can you tap that white girl for me? Oh, after the devil made you, he broke the mold.
To the point where I'm starting to realize how harmful they are, because they have stolen a legacy of black political thought and Pan-Africanism and turned it into what we pejoratively call hoteps. But I'll come back to that in a second. That in mind, I want to be clear, though, that Farrakhan's anti-Semitism and, say, Alex Jones's anti-Semitism that is traditionally white supremacist are not the same. They don't come from the same root causes. They don't have the same end goals. This is important to understand because I know a lot of you get all hot and bothered by the idea of finding a Blittler to content farm, and we'll try to make lazy, uninformed comparisons between these fringe black ideologies and the mainstream white media news outlets that peddle the same thing. Both forms of anti-Semitism are harmful and deserve critique, but Alex Jones was a huge media figure for years before lawsuits finally took him down a few pegs just a couple of years ago. Meanwhile, Farrakhan hasn't been on mainstream TV in well over a decade, and Tucker Carlson, who is still putting out anti-Semitic nonsense, is the most watched news anchor in all of American TV. These two things are not the same, but that's literally a future video. Getting away from the easy stuff is the fact that Farrakhan and the NOI have been prophesying this doomsday future revolutionary upheaval that they will help, guide black people through after some type of calamity that finally causes the powers that be or the aliens to come back to Earth and start to really address the needs of black people or something. I don't exactly get what it is, but here's the thing. If there ever were some type of super societal breaking calamity, the NOI would probably have the most significant set of resources in all of Black America because they got it. The NOI has a pretty significant security force called the Fruit of Islam, who I have seen put in work many a time. They are not to be played with, which is one of the reasons I'm a little scared to do this video, but I'm sure that people will be okay with a little bit of critique. And the Fruit of Islam are not new. In fact, it's the Fruit of Islam that was probably at the root of why Malcolm X left the NOI back in the 1960s. After Malcolm X had spent several years working with the NOI, he began to be disillusioned and frustrated with the fact that they would always talk about things they were going to do, and they had every resource necessary to do some of those things in terms of being direct action against the state. But the NOI never bothered to actually do anything. After falling out with the NOI, he actually went on his pilgrimage to Mecca, and when he came back, that moment of traveling the world opened his eyes to just how false the NOI's doctrine, and he came home to America, really a burgeoning leftist if you pay attention to how his rhetoric was developing at the time. He began to reject the black separatist philosophies of the NOI.
Despite the fact that I tried to protect the Muslim movement, if you'll notice, they use their newspaper to slander me and to label me as a hypocrite and as a rebel. And Mr. Muhammad himself said that...
I just got to say, that pilgrimage to Mecca return photo, clip, is that not just... Yo, that's where them stereotypes be coming from, man. Yo, why can't brothers just travel, man? Travel, enjoy the food, enjoy the culture, and then just come back regular with some stories. Yo, they turned him all the way out, huh?
I defected. Well, in reality, I never even left the Muslim movement. They put me out.
The NOI was not at all happy with this and constantly levied threats in his direction.
Oh, yeah,
threats that eventually came to fruition as Malcolm X was assassinated by NOI members in February of 1965.
1 minute later, he was shot down by 10 bullets.
Crazy.
18 minutes later, he was dead. For Malcolm X, too, the chickens had come home to roost.
Well, very shocking. But look. Think about that, y'all. And this is something that I think is so twisted up about both Malcolm X's story and Martin Luther King's story. Of course, they're just, positioned as some kind of yin and yang, and it's just bullshit. But think about this. When he was on that radical Nation of Islam separatist tip, like, he was a pain in the ass, but they're like, right? He leaves that, comes back on some actual hint of socialism type shit, and they're like, oh, no, he's got to go. Nope. Yeah, the Malcolm X experiment is fucking over. Fuck out of here, right? And then with Martin, it's like the same thing. He was doing all his marches and organizing and nonviolent resistance and da-da-da-da-da. But as soon as he got on that socialist tip, started really talking about the problem with white moderates, gotta go. Gotta go. Curtains. Curtains on that MLK experiment too. Man, let's talk about what ideas is it that America is really the most afraid of.
Yesterday on theory of Malcolm's death. We have known Malcolm for quite a few years.
One of the ugliest rumors about Farrakhan is that he may have had something to do with Malcolm X's murder. Farrakhan had a lot to gain from Malcolm X being out of the picture and has clearly since then emerged as the face of the NOI and the most powerful political force among black people in the world for the last 50 or 60 years. And by rumor, I mean complete alleged fact, because this man admitted on live TV that he definitely contributed in some way to the forces that eventually led to Malcolm X's death.
Yes, it is true that black men pulled the trigger. We cannot deny any responsibility in this. Where we are responsible, where our hands are a part of this, we beg God's mercy and forgiveness. Perhaps a healing can come.
How is he still roaming free? What? That is some shit that will get you the admiration of Donald J. Fuckface Trump. That type of thuggery right there. Holy shit. That is some terrifying gangsters. I'm telling y'all, even the mob don't fuck with them cult leaders. Even the mob don't fuck with that God shit. Boy, the religious leaders, man, they get that righteousness in their head, boy, and there's nothing. That is some scary, cold-hearted shit right there.
To Miss Shabazz and her family, as I may have been complicit in words that I spoke.
That's crazy, Wayne. They be going
leading
off
up
right
to
now.
February 21st, I acknowledged that and regret that any word that I have said caused the loss of life of a human being.
Just this past week, Atala Shabazz gave me her reaction to the meeting. Quote, "He has never admitted this before, publicly, until now. He's never caressed my father's children. I thank him for acknowledging his culpability, and I wish him peace."
It's so crazy to me when I went back. Like, I've known this because, I'm from Chicago and I grew up in these communities. So, we all know that Farrakhan was alleged Malcolm X's assassination. But, I didn't remember this video clip. And, when I watched this, it's y'all, he admitted he alleged shit. Why does he get a pass for this? Why is this something we're not supposed to talk about? This man helped allege Malcolm X, and he probably did it with the feds. Y'all. And we don't know this for a fact, but we do know that the men who were initially arrested and convicted of Malcolm X's murder were NOI members, but they also themselves were recently released, and now the Shabazz family, Malcolm X's children and grandchildren, are suing the CIA, the FBI, and a bunch of other alphabet groups because...
what's up with this man? This Ben Crump, man, he's man is everywhere.
They recognize that there was definitely some type of cover-up in Malcolm X's assassination. They cover up that, we don't know exactly who killed Malcolm X, much like many people from that time period where assassinations were happening all the time in the 1960s.
I'm sorry, I just got to say it, but who killed Biggie and Tupac, though?
You'd be a fool to think that Minister Farrakhan himself doesn't have a decent idea of what really happened there and just hasn't told the truth about it. Considering all of this, how has this man and his movement been allowed to be emblematic of the black radical tradition for the last 50 or 60 years? To me, the answer is quite simple, but just hard to swallow, which is that Farrakhan, while excellent on all these other forms, is really an extremely effective tool for the status quo because he's such a big distraction.
The satanic Jews.
I grew up in Chicago under the Islamic practices of Warif D. Muhammad, the actual legitimate son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who created the NOI years before all this happened. Warif D. Muhammad was supposed to be in Farrakhan's place. He was expected to take over the NOI after Elijah Muhammad died, but Warif D. Muhammad rejected the NOI pretty early on in his life because of its black supremacist doctrines and cultist ways. Warif sought to lead black people toward Orthodox Islam. He took what was left of the NOI and took it into traditional Islam in Chicago.
Minister Farrakhan, you were once one of the nation's most visible and articulate spokesmen, but it seems you've had a low profile since Wallace D. Muhammad assumed the leadership of the organization. Is that by design, if it's true?
Well, I think that
Right after Warf D. Muhammad kind of shut the initial NOI down, Louis Farrakhan came behind Warf D. Muhammad and reformed the NOI in its original form. This created a conflict between them that eventually was healed in the early 2000s, but it's a well-understood reality among actual Muslims and black Muslims that there's always been some conflict between these two communities, because the truth of the matter is the Nation of Islam isn't really Islam much at all, if you know the reality behind the organization. And while W.D. Muhammad was no socialist, he was a true spiritual leader and was much more moderate and collectivist in his rhetoric. He wasn't the bombastic and inflammatory figure that Farrakhan was, which you would think would make him more popular to the status quo and the powers that be. But that's not what happened. Instead, it's Farrakhan who was able to, again, take this inflammatory, often anti-Semitic rhetoric and rise to the top of black political thought during this time period.
Farrakhan, because he's not really challenging the economic hierarchy of capital, he's not making any demands of policy, he's not actually doing anything but calling out, quote unquote racism, the Jews, and maybe some aspects of American imperialism that, interfere with his international connections. He's a perception of radicalism that challenges nothing. So he's a perfect foil for the political moment in the rising 80s and 90s, an increase in neoliberalization.
Here's inspiring philosophy.
Yeah, I fucked that one up. Also,
so American imperialism.
If he's like anti-Semitic, a Muslim. Oh, but he's not the one who's like serious about the Muslim part? Oh yeah, that's definitely useful. That's definitely good. We can go with that.
That, interfere with his international connections. He's a perception of radicalism that challenges nothing. So he's a perfect foil for the political moment in the rising 80s and 90s, an increase in neoliberalization of black politics, because he creates just like much.
Wayne, that's what I'm talking about, Wayne, with the black conservatives, man. Black people deserve the truth, man. These cults ain't got nothing for us, man. But yeah, man, it's hard, yo. And I'm telling you, that's what I'm dealing with in my own family. Y'all would not catch my grandmother dead in a pair of pants in public, okay? Like, it just doesn't happen, okay? Because a godly black woman should not be wearing no. I'm just telling y'all, this type of stuff. My grandmother said to me one time, I wouldn't take a newspaper out of this house without my husband's permission. Black people do not need God in any way, shape, or form.
Of hip-hop, this perception of radicalism that challenges nothing. It doesn't challenge capital. It doesn't demand the state to make a redistributive policy. It doesn't challenge corporate power, and it doesn't do anything to actually challenge the way in which race is used within a capitalist hierarchy to perpetuate the immiseration of large segments of the black community. So he becomes a perfect tool to maintain the status quo, because his charade of radicalism keeps black people clapping while it actually doesn't allow them to demand or challenge anything.
The reality is that Farrakhan is more useful and less dangerous to the establishment politics and status quo than he and his followers would like you to think. What makes Farrakhan as a problem is that he inherited these radical traditions around black power, black nationalism, etc., in possibly the worst possible way. The Nation of Islam has roots in Garveyism, i.e. the teachings of Marcus Garvey, who was a prominent black political figure of the early 1900s and one of several ideological nemeses of W.E.B. Du Bois. Garvey himself has a lot of issues and is probably the core source for much of the fringe black political movements that exist today. When I say that Farrakhan inherited the black power or black nationalist tradition in the worst possible way due to Garvey, I don't say that lightly. There are a lot of very easy critiques to make about Garvey that are directly connected to Farrakhan, the anti-Semitism, possible fraudulent acts, the pretty explicit weird takes around black supremacy and race mixing and miscegenation. Garvey did meet with the KKK during his time because he felt like the KKK would be a useful ally in supporting his goal to move black people from America to Africa. And when you look into Garvey's explicit goals for his movement, It is a very right-wing, very conservative framework for how to address Black people's problems.
They would say that, Garvey was a conservative, and I would agree with that. His predecessor was clearly conservative. He was definitely, racial uplift, Black capitalist type. And also his notion of Pan-Africanism was about a Black Christian civilizing mission on the African continent. That was his vision of quote-unquote Pan-Africanism.
For some, it's hard to
Black people are going to go back to Africa and re-mission Africa. Crazy.
With the fact that Garvey was a conservative, but the record clearly shows this. His ideal for Black liberation through commerce and economic viability comes out of the school of thought that was built by Booker T. Washington, another ideological adversary of W.E.B. Du Bois during this time. And Washington, like Garvey, felt that it was more important for Black people to build economic and commercial engines, and that would somehow allow them to agitate for better rights and better treatment under white supremacy. The ideology of Farrakhan, inherited from Garvey, has come to what likely would have been its eventual conclusion had Garvey been able to do the same years ago. It has turned into a capitalist boondoggle for the Black bourgeoisie and, of course, the white elites to let this Black power struggle waste its time collecting donations, trying to invest in a system that exploits them, and avoiding the more viable Black radical traditions that would actually challenge the status quo and lead to change. Because Garvey's political ideology still fits very well into the capitalist project here in the States, he is held up as the core figure in Pan-Africanism, which is ironic because the actual Pan-Africanist movement Garvey wasn't all that associated with, because the real Pan-Africanist movement was very much a socialist project. Meanwhile, as I said multiple times, other Pan-Africanist figures like Du Bois, Nkrumah, Robertson, their legacy does not get retold in public discourse. They're not focused on in your children's Black history play. And if they are, those elements of socialist movements and actual Pan-African organizing are completely erased from their legacy. And this is not to say that a lot of those figures do not have their own issues and things they need to be critiqued about their legacies. They definitely do. But to even do that, you would have to tell the whole of their legacies in the first place, and that is not happening because figures like Garvey on into Farrakhan and now Umar Johnson hold the reins of Black radical political movements, and they're basically steering them in the silliest way possible. Umar Johnson is a living, breathing meme. I mean, no disrespect, it's just the reality of the situation.
Why do we have so many in the Black community? We got poor, rich, unemployed, middle class, religious, we got hotep, conscious. You know why we have so many? Because those that control the box pay you to, and they incentivize your.
When Umar Johnson speaks, you will be entertained. You may be inspired, but the status quo is not scared. There's no one afraid of the political ambitions of Umar Johnson, the same way they're not afraid of Tariq Nasheed, the same way they're not afraid of Louis Farrakhan.
Minister Louis Farrakhan, who is he and why is he saying all those things? Ask him on our next Donahue.
The role those figures play in Black liberation and Black movement is basically to make sure that any type of radical or alternative thinking about addressing Black issues will never be taken seriously. Most people know of Farrakhan for his close proximity to many a Black celebrity throughout his time, specifically in hip-hop. And this is not new, but celebrities have always intertwined themselves with politics, Black celebrities included. And Farrakhan's opulent presence and lifestyle made him someone that lended instant credibility to any Black entertainment figure wanting to be taken seriously in terms of Black politics. So for decades, you get Farrakhan with Rakim and Ice Cube and on the Arsenio Hall show. And now, decades later, you hear his name being dropped all over Jay Electronica's album. The desire to be connected to this radical tradition makes perfect sense, especially for hip hop. This was them and their declaration that they were part of that. They were connected to the Black Power movement. That's what they wanted. And if you think about hip hop, especially in the 80s and 90s when this happened the most, it makes perfect sense. Even though the purveyors of that Black radical movement would have hated many of them for their capitalist leanings and materialist lyrics. But Farrakhan's black bourgeoisie trappings and ostentatious nature melded well with a rise of materialism in black media. The black radical tradition stopped being Black Panthers holding guns and it started being black pastors buying mansions and holding fundraisers. And this is partly how we get this black radical cosplay today, where people are again using Fred Hampton's name and his likeness to promote capitalism as if Fred Hampton was in any way in favor of capitalism. And it's sad and funny, really, because the whole time that rappers are posing with Farrakhan in order to somehow connect to these black radical traditions, Kwame Ture is right there. There is and was no greater resource on the Black Power tradition and Pan-Africanism than Kwame Ture, and he didn't die until 1998. While Farrakhan was singing Calypso, Ture was marching with Martin Luther King. While Farrakhan was engaging in activities that resulted in the murder of Malcolm X, Ture was debating the future of Black Power with Fred Hampton. And as Farrakhan rose to quasi-celebrity status and gained federal contracts for his security force and toured the world and the country with lavish accoutrements and Big Steve Harvey suits, Kwame Ture was still struggling to try to keep his mission alive, even as many of his friends and peers were murdered or jailed or exiled. He remained and spoke where he could on the legacy of Pan-Africanism and how all these black leaders from around the world fought and won liberation and started socialist projects all throughout Africa. And to many, this seminal figure is relatively unknown.
Our struggle since the 60s, you will see nothing but betrayals by the petty bourgeois elements in our society. The African bourgeoisie is the most corrupt bourgeoisie in the world. In Africa, they seek luxury in the midst of mass suffering. There are more Mercedes in Africa than in any other continent in the world. In America, as soon as they arrive at a position based on this blood of the people, they snatch that position and run away from the people. But you must not think that they represent the people. They only represent their opportunistic self, using the people every step of the way. It must be clear then, for the 60s, the class struggle in the African Revolution must be more ruthless and uncompromising than in any other revolution.
Now again, Ture, like many of the luminaries from that time, has imperfect takes, flaws, and is not infallible, but nothing to the level of Farrakhan, Garvey, etc. Not even close. But he is barely mentioned in schools. There's no pictures of him with rappers. He's never even been depicted as being a part of the civil rights movement in the many civil rights movies.
I think he is mentioned in Black Klansman.
And documentaries that we all see on a regular basis. He's just been erased from that legacy, even though he was a huge part of that time period.
You know, Ava DuVernay can make a movie about Selma that erases Kwame Ture entirely. You know, that is the kind of trick bag I'm talking about we're in. That this woman who comes out of an Oprah public relations background is able to make a movie that stands in for history, where she literally erases one of the more key figures in that particular moment, never mind that entire history. It's worse. That's what I'm saying. It's worse now that there's more projection and discussion and popular discussion and projection of Black issues and Blackness and various perspectives. But it's almost all of it. Yes. Oh, man, it's so carefully manicured and curated.
Why is it that a figure like Louis Farrakhan is so much more prominent in the public media sphere, in the public imagination, than someone like Kwame Ture? Why? What, why is it that an artist like, now I'm going to sound a little hotep. Why is it that an artist like Jay-Z and some of these people who, rap about wealth and conspicuous consumption and other things, I'm not trying to diminish,
fun stuff,
the breadth of his work, are more popular than some other kinds of conscious rappers. Like, this is an argument that a lot of people make. It's like the hotep version of it is the white man wants us talking about this, they want us to not pay attention to that. There's a version of it that's true. In the same way that there was a whitewashing of our civil rights figures, there is a way that someone like Farrakhan is less dangerous than someone like Ture. And it's important to note why.
The system doesn't want his legacy to be a foundational part of the Black political consciousness. They don't want Nas writing bars about Stokely Carmichael, because then the bars would have to be critical of capitalism and colonialism and the American war machine and the Black bourgeoisie. That is dangerous to the status quo. What they want is Farrakhan speaking about liberation through black economics and posing with Ice Cube. They want the aspirational image of black men in suits and black women in dresses, codifying a white gender aesthetic that has never really been made with black people in mind. They want us to promote the idea that black capitalism is black America's salvation, and that real change comes from somehow working within the system that we all have already established is built not to work for us. Think about the fact that we all know what a hotep is. And I say that having fully participated in the jokes and memes about that particular fringe area of black political thought. But what you realize is that that caricature is built out of incredibly important and valuable political ideologies that have been completely subterfuged in the political imagination of black people. And a main person to point to for that is Farrakhan. He is not the only person that is responsible for that, but the ideology that he is emblematic of is what made that possible. And so now, when you tell a person that you're a Pan-Africanist, they think Umar Johnson. They don't think Kwame Ture. But here's the bigger question, in my opinion. Why did we allow this? Farrakhan wasn't necessarily propped up by white media. In fact, many institutions in white media tried to keep him out of the mainstream as much as possible. The fact is, Farrakhan rose to prominence because we bought into what he was selling. Something that Farrakhan often preached on is this need to fix black people, because clearly we are a broken people here in this country. And that in order to address black people's problems, we have to first be fixed, and that he is one of the people that can help fix us. And by fix, most black conservatives almost always mean become more like white people. Farrakhan and others will say that that's not really what it's about. It's just about being respectable and more disciplined and harder working, as if black people weren't always those things then and now, as if low-wage working class black people of that era and today aren't the most hard-working people in the country. This rhetoric about fixing black people is often referred to as a deficit philosophy towards black issues.
Oh, no, it's that culture. No, it's a load of crap. I'm reading a book right now talking about the Italian-American community and how the New Deal challenged it, literally transformed their whole economic trajectory in this country. But because we don't want to acknowledge that these other ethnic groups, particularly whites in general, benefited from government policy and government largesse, we mystify them with like, oh, they did it out the Irish.
Off the culture.
Oh, the Italians, they were able to have, it's a load of crap. But again, because, as Fanon says, the oppressed will always believe the worst about themselves, and conservatives push this crap all the time. We say this to ourselves to believe that black people are defective. There's something wrong with them. Black people are culturally defective, and that's why they're poor. Or black people are poor, and that's why they're culturally defective. It becomes this ridiculous tautology of a circular reasoning that makes absolutely no sense and denies the fact that black people have always been denied the capacity within American capital's political economy to develop the skill sets to make them competitive labor in this country.
This belief is inherently anti-black and ahistorical, but it's been woven throughout the rhetoric of many a black political leader starting in the 1970s up until now. But to fully examine it, we're going to move away from Farrakhan and into the next black conservative I want to speak on, who, unlike Farrakhan, shouldn't have nearly as many defenders due to his pretty sordid history. This guy right now is mostly known for his heinous crimes against women, but before that, he was still being critiqued by black leftists and even black liberals as we start to recognize that despite his significant and valued legacy among black political thought and black entertainment, he was starting to get a little mask off with the anti-blackness. And what makes it hard is that he was such a legend that his anti-black sentiment was really being ignored by a lot of people, making him the ideal double agent.
I'm not talking about...
All right, that's gonna be good. All right, y'all, that is gonna do it for part one. Man, this is crazy. And it's funny because you could take Farrakhan and swap that out and then throw in any number of black Christian mega pastors, TD Jakes, Creflo Dollar, whatever, and you're right back to the same dynamic that I would identify with, because that is what I grew up with. And looking back on it now, it's the same thing where it does nothing but uphold the status quo and essentially white supremacy and blame black people, literally look down upon
black people for not jucking and jiving and doing the sand dance for butter biscuits. So this is something I'm really excited to get into. Like, it's one of those things that you kind of just do the stream. Like, I gotta like not even think too much about it, because like it really is one of those issues that's I find to be really serious and I take really personally, and I have a real hard time with just the fact that it's like the wool's been pulled over the eyes of black folks, and I don't know what we're gonna do right now. Like, it feels like most of us are still so deeply dependent upon these conservative influences in our community that it's like people even lack the imagination of how they would cope and get by and materialize justice for black folks without these sort of imperialist religions and their other conservative influences. So it's pretty crazy shit, actually. So hopefully we will get back to this for part 2. I'm going to get out of here, try to get some rest. Maybe we'll do a little hanging out. We're in Gather. Come link up with the gang there. The link is down in the description. Otherwise, Uncle Bobby and I will be back tomorrow for part 2 of the Blackout that we did earlier. So if you missed that, make sure you check out part 1. And then at 3:30 p.m. we'll do Hot Program. And don't forget, at 9 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, we have our weekly members-only meeting in Gather. So do show up for that. So good to see everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Said I'm gone.
Why she wanna leave me alone? Saying all I do is wrong. No rights, only been left turns. Playing that she gotta let it burn. Saying that the house not a home. Sunshine cause she heard it all before. Sometimes she don't wanna be alone. Most times she don't want me gone. She don't know I try my all. She don't know I sprung in the sun, but I'm going in the winter, so we good to the fall. Remember how I told you I get it and I win. Now I got it, you ain't answer my call. Wonder if I've been moving too strong. Maybe I just been moving too boss. Really hate when the feeling get lost. Nowadays she just dodge my calls. In the game throwing laws like Paul. Young legend Miss John like Wall. And I wish you never met like Carl. Thick game lay it down like law. Made plans but you canceled them all. I was just trying to splurge in the mall. Now I'm home stacking bread till you call. It's time to roll. She tryna slide. We smoking Zah. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my rib, you know I need you by my side, girl. It's time to roll. She tryna ride. We smoking. Stop acting shy. Cause you a demon when I get between your thighs, girl. You like my rib, you know I need you by my side, girl.
We smoking that side. I'm trying to get high. She said that she not ready for lust. I waste my time. I got demons in my closet. I can't hide. I did all my exes wrong. They wish I died. Damn, I tried.